A bare second after the door slid closed, something slammed into it, leaving a large outward dent in the metal. This was followed by the sound of 4 turrets beeping to life and a sort of general fracas as they and the lizard monster sorted out their differences. Nubby, his fingers still held firmly on the close button, suggested finding another way into the evidence room, or at least waiting to see if the turrets won. Doc, feeling like he should do something leadery, announced that there probably wasn't time, so we'd have to open the door and deal with the thing. The rest of us agreed, but the question of just how to do it was up for debate. After a short argument in which it was decided that trying to flash and rush a creature that had a metal plate instead of eyes and could punch head-sized dents in security doors was stupid. We decided to go with our other usual strategy of blowing the ugly thing up. There was a problem with this plan, though. It had been several weeks of combat since our last resupply, and Twitch's stockpile of explosives was down to just his backup grenade and frag mine, plus the single improvised explosive which Sarge had let him bring on the shuttle. Twitch asked for the rest of us to pony up whatever we had, but Tink and Doc didn't have anything except for a few flashes. Doc was given shit for not saving the syringe of face-melting biotoxin that had been recently extracted from Gravis, at least until he threatened to go get another one and make Tink carry it. Nubby, on the other hand, grinned an evil little grin when he was asked, and reached into his perpetually filthy coat. Up on the surface, Brother Bellicus of the Black Templars noticed a large group of demonic hormagaunts moving to flank him, reached for his grenades, and swore when his hand closed on nothing. At Twitch's mark, Nubby popped the door open just wide enough for a lumpy object which consisted of a half-dozen cross-wired lasgun power packs wrapped with tape and nails, and 2 Astartes-sized frag grenades to be tossed through. A few seconds later, the door was reopened as far as the dent in it would allow, and we all squeezed into a hallway which was a bit worse for wear and smelled rather disturbingly like grilled groks. We all resisted the urge to see if the Xenos remains tasted like they smelled, made our way to the far end of the hallway, and discovered that the door had locked itself when the turrets had activated. Since said turrets had been pounded to scrap by the lizard thing, Tink just plasmaed the door locking mechanism and opened it to reveal a scene of pure mayhem. To start with, it wasn't an evidence room. It was an evidence warehouse. The place was absolutely massive and filled with stacks upon stacks of inquisitorially stamped boxes, as well as a few hundred large metal cubes that we guessed were some sort of mobile prison cell. The stacks had probably been all neat and orderly up to a few minutes ago, but the explosion that had preceded the Demonthrope's escape had occurred just on the other side of the room's left wall. The crates and cells had been scattered across the room, many of them cracking open in the process. Servitors, terrified scribes, prisoners, and escaped Xenos specimens were running in every direction. Several things had caught fire, and in the center of the room there was the mother of all three-way melees. As far as we could tell, the teams were the remnants of the ex-Inquisitor's retinue, a group of servitors and prisoners led by something that looked like a human, except with the size and musculature of an orc war boss, and what we guessed, based on all the extra limbs and such, was an entire gene-stealer cult. Nubby tried to close the door again, but was stopped by Doc. We stared at the carnage for a while, and then unanimously decided that we wanted nothing to do with any of it. Don't get me wrong, we were all brave, upstanding soldiers of the Astra Militarum, the many, the expendable, the guard, and all that. It's just that we had more pressing things to deal with, and honestly, we just didn't really care about who was fighting who over what. In our professional opinion, they all looked like psychotic assholes, so we were perfectly fine with them killing each other their heart's content. At least, so long as they didn't drag us into it. We began sidling around the edge of the room and towards the Demonthrope's crater. The sidle being the form of movement which best conveys, "I am not part of this, please ignore me and go about your business /argument/murder. It took a little work to find our way through the scattered evidence boxes while simultaneously trying to keep as much cover as possible between us and the melee, but aside from the occasional stray shot whizzing by or still warm corpse lying in our path, we managed to avoid most of the locals. There were only 3 real interruptions in our progress. The first was when a terrified man we recognized as the scribe that had accompanied the Inquisitor on the landing pad nearly ran into us. Twitch shot him on reflex, and the rest of us refrained from commenting. The second interruption was a little more eventful. The giant man thing in the middle of the room bellowed. A cell crashed into the wall ahead of us, and something tentacular began to worm its way out. Twitch shot this interruption on reflex too, but this time we all joined in. After a few volleys, the tentacles retreated into the cell. Twitch tossed his frag grenade in after them, and we continued on our way. The last interruption occurred as we neared the crater entrance, and did not begin with Twitch shooting anyone, but that was only because Nubby grabbed his gun. As we approached the center of the crater, 3 indistinct forms that looked a bit like short-cloaked figures came around a pile of crates and practically walked into us. Nubby stopped Twitch and gestured at the rest of us to squeeze against the wall. We did as he said and watched in surprise as he cheerfully waved at the 3 figures, then directed them towards the exit. There was a greasy croaking sound, a whiff of something absolutely vile, and then the figures just vanished into thin air. That was a little disconcerting, but Nubby told the rest of us that it was fine. The cloaked whatsits were bendies, and they were wonderful people. For horrible mutant Xenos, at least. Apparently they hung out in the sewers on some hive worlds, and were a great way to get rid of things. You know, like prescribed substances that no one would buy. Or pieces of equipment that you just happened to have found lying around on the battlefield, but turned out to have belonged to the commissar and now had your fingerprints all over them. Also, bodies. Great for getting rid of bodies. Anyway, wonderful people, he said, aside from the smell. The rest of us eyed Nubby, who had never intentionally bathed or changed his underwear in his life, and whose breath could tarnish ceramite, and decided not to comment. Shortly after that slightly disturbing encounter, we reached the gaping hole that had been blasted in the room's wall. The room on the other side was a much smaller version of the evidence room, with a brand new Demonthrope-installed skylight. We guessed that it had held 50 or so evidence boxes, one of those mobile cells, and 8-ish inquisitorial minions. Now it was filled with parts. Anyway, the knee-deep gore was just backdrop. What really caught our eyes when we peered through the crater was the only intact thing in the room. the top half of our Demonthrope containment unit. Oh, and the half-naked woman who was crouched on top of it and singing.